Hey guys, it's Tori, and today I'm going to be doing the Reread Book Tag. This tag was originally created by Roz at Scally Dandling About the Books. I will link her original video down below. I was not tagged in this by anyone, and in fact she created this months ago, so most people have done it. So I won't tag people either, not that I usually do, but every once in a while I try to. Anyway, but I won't be for this tag because I know a lot of people have already done it. I've seen it going around. I haven't been tagged in it as far as I know, but I really wanted to do it, so that's why we're going to discuss rereading today, and I'm so excited. I love rereading. So anyway, let's get into the questions. The first question is, let's assume you do reread if you're doing this tag. So where do you sit on the rereading scale from almost never to all the time? I am probably going to be on like the lower middle end. Unfortunately, I would like to reread a lot more than I do, but I just feel like there's so many books I have on my physical TBR that it gets very hard sometimes to reread, and I think other people can agree with that. I've tried to set goals to reread more regularly. I would say I probably reread at least 1 to 2 books a quarter each year. So every 3 months I may reread 1 to 2 books within that space of time. So I feel good about that, but I'd like to reread more at some point in the future. I just feel like I have to, I don't know, like Thomas Hardy, for example, I really want to reread a lot of his books, but for some reason I just feel like I need to read all of his books before I can start rereading them, and that's just the way my head's been, and so I know I don't necessarily have to, but I think I'll just enjoy it more if I do that. So that's part of the reason why I set a goal to read all of his works this year, to finish them off, so that I can start rereading his books without feeling like I still have more of his books to read, if that makes sense. So anyway, would like to reread more, but I definitely don't reread all that much. So question 2, has that changed over your reading life? It actually has. I actually reread more now than I used to. Growing up, I feel like a lot of people said growing up they would reread all the time, and honestly growing up I hardly ever reread. I maybe reread a couple books here and there, but overall, even my favorite books, like even Harry Potter, which I love, I didn't reread until I was like in my senior year of high school. So I really didn't reread very often at all. And now, like I said, I really try to prioritize rereading a little bit more than I used to. So definitely it has increased, even though it's not quite where I would like it to be at this point in my life. So question 3, when do you reread? Maybe immediately after finishing a book, or not till years later, or when the mood strikes. So I feel like it's kind of a combination of years later and when the mood strikes. I feel like I'm usually not one to be in the mood to reread a book right after I read it. It should take me at least a year approximately before I really want to reread a book. So yeah, I guess it's kind of in the middle. It's not necessarily years later, but it has to be at least a year later, if that makes sense. So anyway, yeah, I would never immediately start rereading a book after I finish it. I've been tempted a couple times, but I don't, even if I start to, I usually get to a point where I'm like, actually, I need a new story, so I kind of move on. So yeah, typically it has to be some time in between before I'll reread it. Question 4, why do you reread books? Definitely just to get a better understanding of the story. I feel like there's a lot of value in rereading because you know where the story ends up, and so you're able to see the development, you're able to pick up on details you maybe otherwise wouldn't have noticed on the first read. And I just really like getting deeper into the story as much as you can with a story that obviously ends. It doesn't continue like life, but you're able to still really get deeper into the meaning of the story, get deeper into the characters as you reread, and I really enjoy that process. Question 5 is, how do you reread? Faster, slower, just the best bits? I usually will reread faster because I have a better knowledge of what's happening. There's some points that I know I can skip. For example, whenever I reread Les Mis, I'm probably gonna skim a little bit more this time because there's a lot of portions of information about history that I think have some importance and value to them, but I wouldn't necessarily want to get as bogged down as I did the first time. Sometimes I do just kind of open up my favorite books and just read some of the best parts, although I don't usually count that as a full reread. I just count that as a, I just want to refresh myself, or I want to re-engage in the story but not fully. I don't know. Question 6, who or what do you reread more specifically? Which authors or genres or individual books? I really primarily like to reread classics because I just feel like there's just so much value in classics. I find a lot of joy in picking classics apart and getting deeper into them, especially because most often classics have outside like criticisms and things you can read to get deeper that way as well. And so I feel like there's a lot of benefit to that. I also will reread sometimes some contemporary books that are just more my favorites. I will reread, for example, I often reread Harry Potter. I have reread Circe by Madeline Miller because I just really enjoy that story, and I have grown in understanding of Greek mythology, so I thought it would be entertaining, and it was. Usually all the books that I keep, I intend to reread at some point. I don't usually keep books that I would never reread, so yeah, I have some YA even books, YA fantasy books that I still keep because I feel like they have either a world building style or just something about the plot or something that really would inspire me to want to reread them, revisit them. So yeah, really anything that just intrigues me enough to want to get deeper into the story. And that's not blocked by specific genres or anything. However, I do prefer to reread classics the most, but yeah, there are some more modern written novels that I do enjoy rereading as well. Question 7, is there a book that you found better when you reread it? That is a very good question. Let me think about that. I think one I will say is Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë. Now this was kind of a weird situation because when I first read it, I actually really hated it. But I read it for a class. It was like my summer reading before we started up my class in high school, and I really didn't like it. However, once we got into class and started talking about it, I developed more affection for it. So I really found myself falling in love with the story after reading it while discussing it. Then years later, I ended up rereading it, and of course I liked it a lot better than I did on my first read, because my first read, technically I hated it when I first read it. But it was kind of a weird situation because I didn't love it as much as I thought I would based on the love I developed afterwards, if that makes sense. So it was kind of an up and down roller coaster, but essentially I did enjoy it better the second time. Question 8, is there one that was worse on a reread? And for that question, I'm sure I can think of one, just give me a second. Oh, I know what I'll go for. I will go with The Lightning Thief by Riordan. This is the first book in the Percy Jackson series, and I really, unfortunately, didn't love it my reread last year. I read it when I was in middle school, absolutely loved that series, and I kind of had a feeling that I wouldn't like it as much now as an adult, but it definitely was, it went from a 5-star in my estimation to more of a 3-star, so definitely dropped a lot. Yeah, I just feel like the character development is not great, unfortunately. Question 9, which one book have you reread the most times? Now, definitely just the Harry Potter series in general. I'd probably go with either the Sorcerer's Stone / Philosopher's Stone, depending on where you are, and The Prisoner of Azkaban. I think probably the first one I have reread the most, or at least started rereading the most, because obviously it's the first in the series, so every time I'm like, I want to reread Harry Potter, I start with that one, and sometimes I like fall off the wagon, sometimes I make it all the way through. But yeah, it might be between that one, I said between that one and the third one, but I actually think it might be between that one and the 7th one, because I do remember rereading the 7th Harry Potter once or twice outside of reading the whole series, so I think I might have to go with one of those two, probably. Outside of the Harry Potter series, I think the book I've reread the most, I'm going to say Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy, although I've only technically read it full all the way through twice, but Tess of the D'Urbervilles I've gone back to certain parts a lot more than I do with other books, and most other books I've only read twice, so I would say probably Tess of the D'Urbervilles I've revisited the most outside of the Harry Potter series, but Harry Potter definitely takes the cake on that one for me. So that is it. Thank you so much for watching. Again, not tagging anyone because a lot of people have already done it and I'm not going to figure out who has. But if you want to do it and you haven't already, please feel free to do it and let me know down below if you're doing it. Let me know your thoughts as well down below on rereading in general. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you do it very much? I would love to know what are some of your favorite books to reread. Would love to know that as well. And I will see you next time. Bye!